There comes a time in every person's life when the world seems to place a ceiling just above their heads, clear, silent, and invisible. It is not a wall we can touch, nor a door we can force open. It is a glass ceiling, cold and cunning, designed not to stop our breath, but to make us believe we cannot rise any higher. It is this illusion that we must confront, for before we can break the barriers around us, we must first name and face the barriers within. So many carry the weight of invisible chains. These are not made of metal or rope. They are made of words we've heard too often, asterisk, you're not ready, you're not capable, you don't belong. Asterisk, some of these words come from others, but the most dangerous among them echo from within ourselves. When a child grows in a world that questions their worth, it should be no surprise that the adult must wrestle with doubt. When a voice has been silenced too long, it takes time for it to believe it deserves to be heard. The glass ceiling does not always begin in boardrooms or ballot boxes. It begins in classrooms where expectations are lowered. It begins in households where dreams are dismissed as foolish. It begins in the silent moments when one questions whether they are enough. And so, before we lift our fists to the world, we must gently place a hand on our own hearts and ask, asterisk, what have I come to believe about myself, and who taught me to believe it? Asterisk, many of us walk through life burdened by inherited fear. It is passed down like a family heirloom, quiet warnings from those who came before us. Asterisk, stay safe, don't stand out, don't aim too high. Asterisk, these voices were born in love, often spoken by those who bore the wounds of fighting battles we never saw. But if we are to honor their struggle, we cannot live forever in their caution. There comes a moment when the torch must be lifted, not to light the way to comfort, but to blaze a new trail to possibility. Self-doubt is not a weakness. It is a shadow, and like any shadow, it cannot survive the presence of light. That light, my friends, is truth. The truth of your value, the truth of your capacity, the truth of your birthright to rise. And once that truth begins to burn in your chest, even the thickest glass begins to crack. But let us not be naive. There will be days when the pressure seems too much, when the ceiling feels too high and too strong. On those days, I urge you to pause and breathe, not to give up, but to remember that you are not alone. For every person who feels the weight of that ceiling, there are countless others pressing against it too. And when enough of us push, not with rage alone, but with resolve, dignity, and vision, it cannot hold. The journey to break that ceiling begins with reclaiming the narrative within, the one that tells you that your voice is not too loud, your dreams are not too big, your presence is not too much. Let it be known here and now that your place is not behind, beneath, or beside power. You asterisk are asterisk power, not in arrogance, not in vengeance, but in the quiet, unshakable knowledge of your worth. And as you begin to rise, do not be surprised if you feel afraid. Growth is rarely comfortable. The caterpillar must surrender to the cocoon before it can know flight. That space between what you were and what you are becoming is sacred. Do not rush it. Sit with the discomfort. Feel it fully, and then, when you are ready, stand, not in defiance of the world, but in allegiance to your own becoming. Because in the end, the most radical act is not in shouting down the ceiling, but in daring to believe you were never meant to live beneath it. Let that be the first crack. When the storm of doubt swirls around us, when we find ourselves weighed down by feelings of fear, rejection, or failure, we must ask, not what has gone wrong, but what still calls us forward. Purpose, my friends, is not a luxury reserved for the privileged or the powerful. It is the anchor of the human soul. It is the one thing that cannot be bought, broken, or taken away. When we are connected to a purpose greater than our pain, we become unshakable. I have seen men and women stand in the face of overwhelming odds, not because they felt strong, but because they knew why they were standing. A person who knows their purpose does not wait for permission to rise. They rise because they must. They rise because something deep within whispers that life has asked something of them, and it is a call they cannot ignore. We often think that to overcome negative feelings, we must banish them completely. But purpose does not demand we feel happy all the time. It does not promise that we will never again feel tired, broken, or afraid. What it does is give our suffering a shape. It gives our pain a direction. It teaches us that what we endure can be transformed into strength, into clarity, into change. Purpose is not always loud. It does not always roar like a crowd or shine like a spotlight. Sometimes it is a quiet nudge in the chest. Sometimes it is a memory that won't let go. Sometimes it is the face of a child looking to you for hope. And in these moments, we remember we are not just living for ourselves. We are part of a larger story, one that stretches beyond our present struggle. When we are anchored in purpose, the negativity around us cannot sink us. Words meant to diminish us lose their sting. The voices that mock or belittle us fade into background noise. Not because they stop, but because our ears have tuned into a different frequency. A voice within that says, asterisk, you are here for a reason, walk like it, speak like it, live like it. Asterisk, I have known fear. I have felt the chill of uncertainty, but I have also known the fire that purpose brings. A fire that does not burn out, only grows deeper with each setback. Every time you are told no, and yet you keep moving, you are feeding that fire. Every time you fail and choose to learn rather than give up, you are feeding that fire. Every time you stand up for what is right, even when it costs you, you are feeding that fire. And that fire will light the way not only for you, but for those who come after. But purpose is not something we stumble into by chance. It is something we uncover layer by layer, often through hardship. It reveals itself in the questions that won't leave us alone. It calls us in the quiet hours when no one is watching, when we ask ourselves, asterisk, what kind of life do I want to live? Who do I want to be when no one is clapping? What am I willing to endure, not for applause, but for meaning? Asterisk, and when that purpose becomes clear, everything changes. The glass ceiling may still be there, but it begins to crack, not because it has disappeared, but because you are no longer looking at it with fear. You are looking at it with mission, and when mission meets resilience, the impossible begins to move. Let us remember that we were not born to shrink in the face of difficulty. We were born to shape something lasting, something true. Purpose reminds us that our pain is not the end of the story. It is a chapter, and in time it can become the very foundation on which we build something extraordinary. So if you feel lost, do not despair. If the world feels heavy, do not retreat. Instead, listen, go deep. Ask yourself not what is hurting you, but what is calling you, and when that answer comes, whether as a whisper or a thunderclap, follow it. Let it guide you, let it steady you, and let it remind you that your life, your voice, your effort has meaning far beyond this moment. That is how we begin to rise, not by waiting for the darkness to pass, but by walking with purpose through it. There is something sacred about the journey upward, to rise after hardship, to stand after being knocked down, to press forward despite the noise of doubt. But let us be clear, our climb means little if it ends with only us at the top. For what good is it to break the ceiling if we leave others staring at the shards, still trapped beneath the weight we once knew? We were not meant to rise alone. We were not meant to break through only for ourselves. True victory is not solitary. It is shared. It echoes in the footsteps of those we've helped lift. And in those echoes, we find the sound of lasting change. In a world where success is often seen as a race, Many are taught to keep their eyes forward, to move quickly, to think only of their own finish line. But this world has no shortage of winners. What it needs is builders. Builders of bridges, of doors, of paths wide enough for others to follow. We must not only fight for our freedom, we must make sure it opens a way for others to walk through as well. There is deep joy in seeing someone rise because we made space for them, because we spoke a word of encouragement when they needed it most, because we shared what we knew, not to prove we were better, but to prove we were in this together. That is how we tear down not just ceilings, but the walls that keep us apart. Every generation has its climbers, but history remembers those who turned around, reached back, and pulled others up. And that reaching back is not weakness. It is the truest test of strength. Because it takes courage not only to rise, but to pause on the climb and say, "Come with me. There is room for you too." When we rise, we must become mirrors, not so others see us, but so they see what is possible within themselves. Let us speak not only of what we overcame, but how we did it. Let us share the pain, the process, the persistence, not just the result. That is how we break cycles. That is how we replace shame with courage. That is how we become more than success stories. We become guides, mentors, examples. We all remember someone who gave us that chance, don't we? Someone who looked past our uncertainty, past our hesitation, and saw what we could become. That one teacher, that elder, that friend, that stranger who believed in us before we had the words to believe in ourselves. Their light made a path for us, and now it is our turn to be that light for someone else. Because the ceiling we break is not just made of glass, it is also made of history, of silence, of fear, and it is heavy. No one breaks it with a single blow. It cracks slowly over time with the weight of every effort, every voice, every outstretched hand. So when you rise, bring others with you. Share the stage, share the table, make space where there was none before. That is where your power becomes legacy. Do not believe the lie that helping others dims your light. The flame that lights another does not burn less brightly. In fact, it burns stronger, and when many flames rise together, the ceiling doesn't just crack, it shatters, not in silence, but in song. You see, when one of us breaks through, we open a gap. But when we rise together, we create a path, and that path becomes a highway of hope, where those who once only dreamed of reaching higher can now do so with strength, with support, with certainty that they do not walk alone. So I ask you, as you move forward, look around you. Who is still standing at the base of that ceiling? Who is watching, wondering if it is possible for someone like them to rise? Be the answer. Be the proof. Be the hand that says, you are not invisible, you are not forgotten, you are next. Because in the end, the highest place we can reach is not above others, it is beside them. So often we are told that to be strong we must be fearless, that courage is the absence of pain, the silencing of doubt, the erasure of all weakness. But this, my friends, is a myth. Courage is not born in ease. It is not found in comfort. Real courage is what we discover when the night is darkest, when the heart is heavy, and still, somehow, we choose to move forward. We must understand this. Fear does not make us weak. Pain does not disqualify us from greatness. These are not signs that we are broken. They are signs that we are human, and to be human is to feel. But what we do with those feelings, how we respond to the weight of the world pressing on our shoulders, that is where strength lies. I have seen people tremble as they took their first steps into the unknown. I have seen eyes filled with tears, not because they were defeated, but because they cared so deeply about the path ahead. That trembling, that breaking of the voice, that pounding of the heart, Those are not faults to be ashamed of. They are the price of transformation. They are the sound of a soul expanding beyond its past. To break the glass ceiling, we must not pretend that fear does not visit us. We must not wear a mask of invincibility. Instead, we must carry our fear with us, acknowledge it, and then rise in spite of it. For the strongest among us are not those who feel no fear, but those who walk through it with dignity. We live in a world that teaches us to hide our struggles, to bury our sadness, to put on a face of unshaken strength. But this world does not need more masks. It needs more truth. It needs people who are willing to say, yes, I am afraid, and yes, I will keep going. That honesty, that raw, trembling honesty, is a kind of power that no enemy can match. When we embrace our vulnerability, we become more than individuals. We become examples, because every time we step forward in our truth, we give others permission to do the same. We create a ripple, a quiet rebellion against the idea that only the unscarred are worthy of rising. Do not be ashamed of the days when your spirit feels tired. Do not shrink on the days when your confidence wavers. These are not setbacks. They are sacred spaces where resilience is born. Each tear you shed, each moment you doubt, each breath you draw before choosing to carry on, these are bricks in the foundation of your breakthrough. Let no one fool you into thinking that strength means silence. Let no one tell you that the only way forward is to erase what you feel. Your emotions are not your enemy. They are a signal, a map, a sign that you are still alive, still reaching, still daring to believe that a better life, a better world is possible. There is a power that comes from continuing when everything inside you says stop. There is a fire that is forged only in the moments when you think you have nothing left, and yet you find something more. It is in those moments that the glass above you begins to shift, not because it has become weaker, but because you have become stronger. You see, pain is not the end of the story. It is a teacher, and what it teaches us, if we let it, is that we are far more capable than we ever imagined. That we can be wounded and still walk, that we can be frightened and still lead, that we can be broken and still rise. So do not wait for the fear to vanish before you act. Do not wait for the pain to subside before you speak. Move forward as you are imperfect, uncertain, but determined. Let your scars be signs not of defeat, but of survival. Let your trembling hands build something beautiful, because in the end, it is not the absence of struggle that defines the brave. It is the refusal to let the struggle define you.